This episode of Cowboy Crossroads is brought to you by my friends at the Western Folklife Center in Elko, Nevada, who kindly provided a space for me to record this interview. You can find out more about the Western Folklife Center at westernfolklife.org. I'd like to start today's show with a poem written by an old-time poet named Robert V. Carr. This was published in his book called Cowboy Lyrics in 1908, and this piece is entitled, Dance You Punchers Dance. Oh, whoop it up and let's be gay. It's a long time now till break of day, so for a good time, get a hunch and cut your girl from out the bunch, and say you may. Start them fiddles right away, and Jiggin' Finn with his accordion will do the rest. So all join in and pound the floor with your high-heeled boot and swing your Granger girl so cute and dance you punchers dance. Oh, lips are sweet and eyes are bright. 'Tis sparkin' time for all tonight. So lope along and do your best and cut right in and lead the rest and say you may. Start them fiddles right away and Jiggin' Finn with his accordion will do the rest. So all join in and pound the floor with your high-heeled boot and swing your Granger girl so cute and dance you punchers dance. There's drinkin' fodder for you all. My land of goodness, hear that call. The set's a-formin', cut loose now, and show them bashful fellers how. And say you may. Start them fiddles right away, and Jiggin' Finn with his accordion will do the rest. So all join in and pound the floor with your high-heeled boot, and swing your Granger girl so cute, and dance you punchers dance. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges, and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode, I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy west and beyond. My guest today is Elana James. Elana is a singer, songwriter, fiddle player, and a founding member of the hot jazz and western swing trio Hot Club of Cowtown. She has appeared on record and on stage with Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson, and the Hot Club of Cowtown has appeared at such festivals as the National Folk Festival and the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival. I sat down with Elana in Elko, Nevada during the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering and recorded this interview. Here's Elana James.
Well, I did grow up in Kansas City. I grew up in Prairie Village, Kansas, which is a suburb, And I started playing violin when I was like 3 because my mom was a classical violinist. I mean, she still is. And I heard her playing around the house, and I thought, I thought I could do that. My sister was playing the flute. She's older than I am, and so I kind of didn't want to go that direction. So I started playing Suzuki violin when I was a little kid. But at the same time, my parents were divorced, and my dad always used to love to take us out to dude ranches in the summer. So the last week of August, from when I was really young, we'd always go. We went to just lots of places in Colorado and Wyoming over the years, and that was always my very favorite week of the year by far. And so at some point, we came back from one of those summer weeks, and I begged my dad for horseback riding lessons. And so from the time I was probably 6 or 7, I was doing violin and I was doing horseback riding. And actually, as a young person, those two things just kind of dominated my childhood, really. And I got a horse when I was 9. We got her for $1 from a woman who was getting a divorce herself, and she couldn't afford to keep her. So she gave this horse to us for $1, and then she gave us the trailer and all her tack for $50 more. So, and her name was April, and we had her the whole time I was growing up, and that was just such an incredibly, just a treasure, to grow up with an animal to have in my life and to spend time with. So I really grew up with this kind of combination of violin playing, which was mostly classical at that point, and being into horses and stuff. And eventually, like by the time I got into junior high and high school, I started to have to focus on violin more, like kind of take it more seriously. And I was pretty like rebellious and kind of disruptive when it came to the violin. Like I loved it, but I wasn't that disciplined. For a while I quit. And then when I picked it back up again, I just got into fiddle music a little bit more. So I started to go busk in Westport, which is like the kind of the artsy, or it had been the artsy sort of bohemian quarter of Kansas City, Missouri there. And just in high school, I'd go out like on a weekend night with a friend playing the tambourine or just by myself and play fiddle tunes. Sometimes my sister and I would go out there and play like, Telemann canonic duets or, early Mozart duets and stuff on the street. And I just have always been attracted to this more social way of playing music instead of just like by the book, by the page, so structured. Even then I was like really drawn to that, but I was afraid to kind of leave the classical path. Anyway, fast forward. So then I went to college in New York, and after my second summer there, I went to this chamber music camp, and I was like practicing viola. I had moved on to playing the viola at that point, and I just had this epiphany. I was like, I have this whole skill set. I was like, I remembered that I had enjoyed going to like these guest ranches as a kid, and I thought I could be getting paid right now to like ride in the Rockies and guide people. It was like, and instead I was just like sweating at this like chamber music festival where I'm totally behind, and I just was desperate to do something other than that. And so right before my senior year of college, I started working in Colorado at this guest ranch. I played in the owner's cowboy band, and that's really how I first got into really like cowboy music. His name's Ken Jones. This place is the home ranch. It actually just got sold last year, which was really sad. It was around since the 80s. And but he was really into Western music. So I played in Ken's band that summer, and then I wound up working there a couple more summers around the time of college.
And was that like a swing band or kind of like a chuck wagon?
No, it was more like
band,
like a chuck
Sons
wagon.
of the Pioneers.
Yeah. Right. It wasn't.
Tunes.
It was definitely not a dance band. I mean, he basically wrote a lot of tunes. He's a really good songwriter, and he had me and then this other Wrangler, Michael Moon, were in his band, and. But yeah, it wasn't a dance stat. It was more like a showcase for just like traditional cowboy tunes. And he was a super huge Western music fan. So like Riders in the Sky would come through there sometimes. He had Don Edwards one summer. It was just a great opportunity for me to kind of learn. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I loved kind of playing like, beautiful long whole notes in the background. And I didn't even know what key these songs were in or anything like that, but that's what I started out. That was really like my initial immersion into that. And we played at the campfire, every Saturday night for guests and stuff like that. I still love that. I don't really get to do that very much these days, but I love that. But, I would say, Suzuki is my favorite. I just love that program. It's a wonderful program. And I'd say a hugely disproportionate number of people who are in like roots music and traditional music started out in Suzuki because, it just gives you an opportunity to learn without relating music to seeing something on a page. But another thing Suzuki does, I don't know if it's where you are too, but they have group lessons, that's usually mandatory. They'll have like the weekly lesson, and then you have to go to group. And group lesson is usually like a Saturday or a Sunday for a couple hours, and that is where you get that social aspect, and you get kind of, a little bit of a competitive thing. You hear the older kids who might be a book ahead of you, or they're playing a song that's like 3 or 4 songs down, and so you see what they're doing, and then, you play your song. And to me, that was also a very powerful thing because it gives your music making a social context. And when you're that young, you need something to bolster that instead of just practicing in this kind of isolation. And I found that hugely valuable for sure. And that's a unique thing to Suzuki. It's built into that system. I'm not saying other violin programs don't do that, but that's one of the wonderful features of it. And just that freedom that it gives you. But as far as getting burnt out, when I was probably in junior high, I was like, I wasn't putting in the time to practice. And I had this teacher that told me I was going to have to be practicing 4 hours a day. And I was like, whoa, I said that's not going to be happening. I didn't have the time to do that. So I did quit in junior high. But I guess I'm the sort of person, I just needed the liberty to quit. And then literally as soon as I told my mom, I was done, then I just started playing more than ever, but nobody was like shoving it down my throat.
So you didn't quit playing, you just quit the
Lessons,
program.
Yeah.
The
and then I resumed lessons later, like in high school. And then in college, I mean, I majored in like comparative religion, but I took a lot of music classes at the same time, like Manhattan School of Music and then summer programs and stuff like that. I had an opportunity to really study with some of the very, very, very best classical players. You know, that's why I went to New York, really to like be able to participate in classical music at the highest possible level at that point in my life. And I do feel that I was given that, and that has been so valuable to me because it's like what I've then chosen to do with a lot of that information or technique. I don't ever wonder if like what would have happened if I would have, met these people or been trained classically. It's like I was given so much attention and information and wonderful care and guidance by so many wonderful players that to me it's like then devoting those skills to this other thing, this like Western swing or Western music or I don't know. It gives me a kind of a confidence and satisfaction because I do think it's honoring. I don't feel like I've deviated from what I should have been doing. I feel like I took all of that valuable care and have applied it to something that is more personal to me. Like I said, I was always kind of attracted to these other kinds of music and stuff. And so it was like in about 1994, I went back to New York. I'd been working in Colorado, like worked at that ranch. And then I was like working for this like outfitter. And I was like out of money and out of whatever. The season was over. So I went back to New York and I missed playing Western music. So I put this ad in the Village Voice and Whit saw my ad. So Whit was among many people who answered it, but it was basically like, I want to play, in a band. I'm only interested in someone who has a working band. So anyway, Whit answered my ad and we started playing together, but I didn't really know what Western swing was. I maybe had heard of Faded Love. I'd heard of San Antonio Rose and I'd heard the name Bob Wills, but I equated the idea of like any kind of swing music with like Lawrence Welk and like women in, sky blue gowns and stuff like that. I didn't have really anywhere to put that. Anyway, Whit started making me cassettes of stuff that he liked, and he was really into hot club, like the Quintet of the Hot Club of France, so he was really into Django Reinhardt and Stephen Grappelli. He had a lot of those early recordings of them, and then he would also put mixed in with the cassettes, the Tiffany transcriptions and stuff where Louis Tierney and Joe Hawley are taking these insane, beautiful solos, and then also he put in like some Joe Venuti and Eddie Lang, and I used to listen to that all the time, and I couldn't really tell. Nobody was there to tell me, like, this is European hot jazz from Paris, and this is, guys playing live on the radio in Oklahoma in 1937. Like, they all sounded totally akin to each other, to me. And I just heard in that style some beautiful fusion of all these things that were already a part of what I loved. So these basic melodies, this swinging, happy, social dance music, but then this elegant, virtuosic and virtuous soloing. These fiddles taking these beautiful, inspired, very jazzy, sophisticated solos, and yet the band's playing hokum, and then when the melody gets played, it's just like, Eck Robertson or Bob Wills playing these sort of lonesome, beautiful fiddle melodies. So I really loved that, but as far as the aha moment, Whit, of course I knew who Johnny Gimble was then, right around that time, and I saw him play at Lincoln Center. He played with Bill Kirch, and they did a twin bill or something, and I had Johnny Gimble's CD called the Texas Fiddle Collection, and literally when I first heard Johnny Gimble play on that album, I just thought, well, there it is. If this person who has such tone and feel and humor and imagination in his playing has devoted his life to this style, or he's such a titan of this tradition, it's good enough for me. I mean, that was the standard that I heard. I just thought I should be so lucky to be able to get involved in this tradition and be able to head in that direction myself. And it was really Johnny Gimble's tone and feel, and then that led me to move to Texas and of course meet him and get to have a relationship with him. And a lot of those guys over the years who we were so lucky that we got to meet a lot of guys in Southern California and also in Texas who were like World War II veterans, people who played with Bob Wills, people who, knew everybody firsthand. We used to go to Turkey, Texas and hang out with Frankie McWhorter there. And I love Frankie so much. He was one of my greatest inspirations, and especially his horse life and his fiddling life and how he blended those two things together. To me, he's been a beacon for like that, paradigm also. And everybody is so different, but like he truly, for me, I mean, to watch him play live, I'm sure, I know there are a lot of people who love, the Rolling Stones and the Who and Cheap Trick and whatever. But like when I used to get to see Frankie McWhorter, I mean, I feel like what that meant to me was the same or greater than, seeing those other people, what other people might equate as their greatest moment. His playing, just his character, his spirit, the way he would use his bow arm and his body, and he'd like hold his cigarette, with his bow hand, and he just had this kind of I can't even explain it. It's something from another time, that he manifested, and I just loved him. I mean, I still love him. Just because he's not here physically doesn't mean, I can't still love him.
In a song entitled Between the Rivers, Texas panhandle fiddler and cowboy Frankie McWhorter wrote these words about Bob Wills' day in Turkey, Texas. Now, every year in Turkey, Texas, early in the spring, his Texas playboys pay tribute to the king of Western swing. They play and sing and laugh a lot and talk of days gone by. But when they play Faded Love, you may see 'em cry. Hey, just listen to them play, hear their music ring. Folks come from miles and everybody smiles when they hear the sound of the Western swing. Say, just listen to them play, hearts once more young and gay. There's no other day those playboys play like they do in Turkey on Bob Wills' day.
I think I read about Bob Wills' day in probably in 94. I probably went there for the first time. I remember I rented a car and slept under it, and I came down. I'm not from New York, but I was doing this magazine internship there. So that's where I was living at the time, but I was desperate to get down to Texas. I had a map of Texas on my wall in the little office that I was working in, and I went down for Turkey, Texas, and I think I met Frankie that first time, and I met Bob Boatwright, and they could not have been nicer and more welcoming to me. And then in Texas later, too, there were people like, Dave Alexander, I remember, used to invite me to sit in. I can't even count. We got to play with, of course, Johnny Gimble, but Cliff Bruner, before he passed away, he was down in Houston, and we'd get together with him sometimes. And just to have been given that opportunity to play with those guys, But yeah, Turkey was certainly, I want to say that might have been the first time I met and certainly got to play, with those guys.
One of the fiddlers from the Western swing tradition who had a deep influence on Elana James was the legendary Johnny Gimble, who played with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. When Gimble passed away in 2015, Elana said this in an interview with the Tennessean. Johnny is the first fiddle player I really ever heard play Western swing. His tone, his humor, the easy elegance and energy in his playing was all there from the first breath. I immediately thought that if someone who played like that, with that level of depth and grace, had devoted himself to Western swing, it was okay for me to devote my love and time to it. The way he would phrase his solos was what I have always aspired to and dream of for my own playing.
We got to the point where, he did play on our first record, which was so exciting. And then he played on one of my solo records. He came in the studio on his 80th birthday, and we played some tunes. I have a record called, I guess that was my first record, and he played we did Silver Bells and Goodbye Liza Jane and something else. But over the years, I mean, we got to know the Gimbels, hang out with Johnny, go over to their house, or we played some shows together and stuff over the years. And I mean, there's nothing really more you could ask for, that, you know. And I feel I'm sorry for people who come after us, because I feel like I got to be exposed directly to this generation of players who invented, you know, this style. And everybody progresses. That's like the folk process and stuff like that. But for me, I'm just so fortunate that I had the time and the good luck, you know, to be able to have my path cross with them. Oh, you know, he just was so humorous. He had his sense of humor was genius. He's a genius, and you could hear the genius in his playing, and you could hear his sense of humor in his playing, you know. But he just had a few things that he said over the years that, you know, my favorite quote of his, I guess, is like, you know, play every chance you get and be real lucky. You know, people are like, what do you think? Do you have any suggestions for just getting started? You know, and that was like his thing that he would go to. But I do recall he either said this to me or I read this once, but he's such a copied person. I mean, so many people try to imitate his playing and learn his solos, and that's great and stuff. But I can't remember where this came from, but, you know, at one point he had a quote that was like, you know, if you play like me, who's going to play like you? You know, and so I think that's true. That's really true. And you can imitate a person, and that's what you do when you're a young person setting out. But eventually, you are going to have to get your own voice, you know, and not play every Johnny Gimbel solo, you know, right, on every Bob Wills tune that you could have gotten your hands on. And I'm not saying people do that, but it's true.
Hot Club of Cowtown are currently celebrating 23 years of bringing their unique brand of Western swing to audiences around the world. Here's a quote from the Wall Street Journal. This trio's stylistic genesis, as well as title, stems from the realization that the great heritage of strings, guitars, and violins originates mutually with the manouche gypsies of France and the no less virtuosic hillbilly pickers and fiddlers of Oklahoma and Texas. Together, for over 15 years and a dozen albums, the threesome of high-heeled violinist Elana James, guitarist Whit Smith, and bassist Jake Irwin showed from the beginning that jazz and country music could exist together on the same page, a highly commendable achievement, if ever there was one.
Well, part of that is the economics of touring, and that, you know, being a trio is one thing I think that's allowed us to continue. We've been a band for this is our 22nd year, and, you know, that's part of what informs our sound. But just to go back to how we got together, I mean, so that's how I met Whit, and then we had a band in New York City for a year called the Western Caravan. This is all Whit's thing. He put it all together. But I was getting impatient, and I couldn't make any money playing fiddle in New York, and I was working at this magazine and whatever. Anyway, I was like, I had to get out of New York, and I got hired to play in a traveling country band, like a top 40 country band. So I left New York, this guy called me on a Friday, hired me on Saturday. I quit my job over the weekend and flew out on Monday, and that was the end of New York City and me, bye-bye. And I left, and I took this job playing in this traveling country band. We toured, throughout the Western States corridor. But Whit, I guess, missed me, or he thought that, he and I probably had a future playing together. So he moved away from New York, and we went to San Diego. And in San Diego, we spent a year there just playing for tips, in the park and in farmers markets. And we played as a duet. We were called, Whit and Elana. And we would just play stuff. And we met a bass player there, and he joined us. And so we started playing around San Diego, but I immediately wanted to tour. And in fact, when I first met Whit and first went to his apartment in New York City, I thought, okay, well, we'll see about this guy. I don't know, we'll go. So I went up to his apartment, and we literally sat down and played some fiddle tune. I don't remember what it was. It might have been Soldier's Joy or Bill Cheatham or something. But he was the first person I think I'd ever played with who had moving he really just moved the chords around in this style that as a fiddle player, it's everything. It kind of decorates and elevates your own playing when you have this moving set of beautiful chords underneath you. And also he played with a lot of energy. And like me, I think both of us are sort of Luddites in our wish to learn something the right way, sort of, and then maybe if you want to change it, that's fine. But that's not an entirely common approach to music for a lot of younger people. And I just, maybe because I came from classical music, it's always been important to me to like learn the melody, and then if I want to like change it around, that's fine. But at least I know what the melody is, or respect, the fundamental chord changes. And then if you want to turn them into something else, like no problem. But thank God that was something that really appealed to me about him. But just the energy of our playing. And literally before that first song was open, like as you were asking, like, what did I see? Or I could immediately, I listened to your podcast when Too Slim was talking, and he said he started hanging out with Ranger Doug, and he thought people would pay to see this. Do you remember when he said that?
Yeah.
And I thought that is kind of how I thought. I wasn't so much thinking of it monetarily, but I just thought, this is something special. This is something that I love, and I have never felt this before. And I do believe that if I love it, that other people will love it too. I mean, I think that's like a universal kind of thing. And it was so powerful that I was like, it just started taking over really my life. So I ultimately quit my job and started focusing on playing music. But anyway, we moved to Austin in like the end of 1997. So that was about 3 years after we'd first met. And by then we had a trio established, and we called it the Hot Club of Cowtown because this is something Whit came up with. But, the quintet of the Hot Club of France is like, Django Reinhardt, Stefan Grappelli playing hot jazz standards popular in like the 1920s, 30s, early 40s. And that style was also being played in the American Southwest. It was called Western Swing, but it was like, these pop tunes and fiddle tunes and hoedowns and waltzes and all that kind of stuff. So they were happening simultaneously with a lot of the same instrumentation. And those are both of the things that we love to do. So for people who know, they're like, oh, the Hot Club, right? And then we said Hot Club of Cowtown because it's this kind of, it's the imagination. It's like the Western imagination. It's not like a place. It's just kind of a Western aspect. Plus, it's supposed to be kind of like funny, maybe not too serious,
In 2004, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, surprised me with tickets to see one of my all-time favorite musicians, Bob Dylan. Dylan and Willie Nelson were on a tour of America's baseball parks, and Hot Club of Cowtown was the opening act. My wife and I attended the concert in Bricktown Ballpark in Oklahoma City, and I still remember Elana James coming out on stage to play a tune with Dylan and his band. Then, in 2005, Elana James became the first dedicated female instrumentalist in Bob Dylan's touring band in more than 30 years.
We first got to know him because we got that call to do that tour. That was in early 2004. We got like a message. We had a manager for like 6 months. And one of the things that happened when that manager was with us is that he told us that we had, been invited to do this tour with Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson and us. It was like, okay, yeah, all right. The answer would be yes. And so it was an August tour, and it was us opening. We played for like 26 minutes, then, Willie and then Bob. And I just was like, well, look, all I know for sure is that we're going to go on this tour and I'll play for 26 minutes every day for this crowd. That's all I can, and even that's amazing. But the tour started, and like the second day, Willie was backstage and we were jamming, we were like so frenetic and hyper and like just like preparing for these shows. And we were playing Can't Go On This Way. And Willie walks by and he started kind of singing along to it. And then we ended the song, and he was like, you guys should play that tonight for your encore. And I was like, well, I don't really think we're going to get an encore because, we're just the opener. And he was like, you will tonight. And so we did our set, and then we played that last. And he walked out and sang it with us. And it was just the most incredible thing. So then it turns out Willie came out every night and sang that song with us. And I mean, he came out rain or shine, and there were a lot of rain shows where it was incredible. So that was one thing. Already I was like, oh my God. And then about midway through the tour, Bob's tour manager, Mark Rutledge, who was a really nice guy, he like kind of found me backstage, and he was like, hey, Elana, Bob's wondering if you might want to sit in on a song. And I was like, okay. But the truth is, I didn't really know his songs. I didn't grow up listening to that kind of music. I grew up listening to Shostakovich string quartets, and I don't know. I mean, or like 80s pop. So I would kind of sit in, and then every night they'd ask me if I wanted to sit in again, and it'd be 2 different songs every night. And I then would like go to the Walmart Super Center after the show, try to find like Bob Dylan CDs that had the song that we'd just done, listen to that song, try to get it out my head around, and then they just call a different song the next night. So I kind of gave up, but I did get to sit in with him a lot during that tour, and then I amassed a number of Bob Dylan CDs too as a result of that. And then due to various like stresses and band dynamics, our band kind of suspended operations at the end of that season, and he called me and was putting together a new band, and did I want to come out, to LA to just like hang out and play. So it's not like that broke up the Hot Club of Cowtown. I was just like, I actually didn't have anything specific on my plate, So I went out there, and we probably played for like 3 or 4 days, I don't know. And then they offered me, to be in the band, and that was great. And I did that tour with him for, I don't know, not quite 2 months or something like that. But I mean, I won't go into the details, but I mean, I had a fantastic time on that tour, and he was very nice to me, and I think we enjoyed, playing music together. And we had some just funny stuff. I just couldn't believe that I got to go out there and got paid to go on stage, with Bob Dylan every night. They have like, you're hanging out backstage, the velvet curtain is down, the Nag Champa incense gets lit, you can feel like the audience on the other side of the curtain is just like this 5,000 people milling around with this just like extreme anticipation, and it's like the curtain comes up, and it's just, I'd never really experienced anything like that. So that was great. But at the same time, those songs were a challenge for me. Plus he does a lot of things in like D flat and F sharp. And those are like the 2 most horrible violin keys, at least for me personally. So that was really challenging. I couldn't like record our sound check, or I couldn't record our rehearsals because I just wasn't allowed to do that. So I was never really able to take home what we'd done and study it by myself. So every day was just a completely like from whole cloth, a new thing. But one thing he used to say, which I think is funny because it's not true, but like, he knew I came from a classical background, and we had these like fun shows in I think Milwaukee. We played at this really fun venue a couple nights in a row, and I like came off stage one night, and I was like, that was so fun. And he was like, that was so fun. I go, yeah, that was so fun. I think I said it for the second night, or he was like, hey, if you keep singing, I'm gonna have to stop paying you. And then the next night we came off stage, and I go, that was so fun. And he goes, that was so fun, I might have to stop paying myself. But it was so fun because that's what he is into. Like, we used to trade eights, and he approaches it from an improvisational kind of an angle. He's not there like aping his own creations. He's kind of creating something new every night. And that's sort of the style that, that's what we do. And maybe he thought he saw me play and that would work well with his band. But like in the end, he also, I think, and he told me this, he kind of felt like not self-conscious exactly, but like that I was supposed to be doing other things because I was like, he sort of was like, he didn't want me to like hide my light under a bushel. And I think on some level he felt like me being in his band was like an underuse of my talent, which I do think he thought that, and I appreciated that. But to me, it was like, no, this is really fun. But in the end, I didn't stay in his band. And then the following year, I had put my own trio together. So he then hired me and my trio to go out on tour with him again and open. It was like me, Junior Brown, Bob. I don't think Willie was on that tour. Oh, Jimmy Vaughn. So it was us, and also being female, it's like there aren't a lot of females. Like the later you go into this life, female instrumentalists are just not as common. I was really honored to be involved in his organization too, because like I looked it up, and it was like Scarlett Rivera in 1970 was the last dedicated female instrumentalist in his band, as far as I could tell. So I was like, that's quite an honor, to be involved on that level. But, he taught me so much, and our relationship has continued, well past that. But again, in this business, it's like to be able to participate in it on the highest sort of level that you can, and it's kind of like what I was talking about going to New York for college. It's like you're given this opportunity to see how things are done at the very, very highest, most either admired or accomplished level. Not that necessarily you're doing that, but you are a part of that. And taking that with me down the trail, touring as our own band, it just gives you so much like confidence and information that you've been included, with these other people, and we know what that looks like and how that feels, and to be able to navigate knowing that is a hugely valuable thing.
Elana James often spends her summers as a horse wrangler and a packer in Montana's Bob Marshall wilderness. Asked Elana to talk about how working with horses and playing music complement each other.
I was thinking about that before I came to talk with you today, because they also are sort of similar in a way. Like, when Too Slim, you're talking with him, and he said, how come you guys stayed together for so long, or how have you been able to? And then he, in his serious moment, he said that, he felt like that they were essentially on a mission in some way to kind of preserve and promote and continue this worthwhile tradition, and for me, like working as a wrangler, or learning how to pack and stuff like that, it's very much related to playing fiddle. I mean, I think those things go together so beautifully. The hard thing for me over the years has been like how to get them closer together. And it's very hard to do that, because touring, even though you might be playing traditional music, it's all about like airplanes, vans, airports, being in a hurry, hotels, it's a frenetic activity. And then, not that packing or being with guests isn't frenetic, but it's frenetic on a much, much more kind of primitive, organic level. But in terms of like working as a wrangler specifically over the years, I have felt, because, there's this sense that like Dave Stamey was saying, oh, you're just, like a dude wrangler or something. But honestly, nowadays, to be able to be involved in that kind of work, I mean, unfortunately, the people that can afford to do it tend to be, they're affluent people who are already interested in it on some level, but they don't have the skill set to experience the wilderness directly. And those are the people, they want to experience it, but they can't do it themselves. And so to be able to allow those people to have those experiences and to be a person who kind of gets out of their way. Like when I take people out on a trip, I feel like I just sort of say a prayer in myself before we go. It's like, please first of all, let the trip go well, and don't let them like fall off and get injured, but let them come back from this trip having been, filled with something, help them have the greatest time here that they possibly can have. Because by doing that, who knows what they will then do with that information? They're going to tell their friends. They're going to become interested in, conservation. Their children are going to have relationships with horses and wilderness and nature in these ways that you don't really know how they're going to ultimately play out. But it becomes almost like this. I'm not saying it's specifically political, but there is a kind of moral value and spiritual value in allowing these people to have these experiences. And I love to be able to participate in that. And it is very much like playing music in a band, because the same thing at night, you want a person to leave 2 hours later in a different place than they were, feeling better, feeling more emotionally connected to themselves or other people. So, of course, my dream, is to have those two things happen together, and I have some ideas about that. And also I just love being in the backcountry, and I love having those skills. And I think about Frankie McWhorter, and I really believe that there's nothing wrong with having these sort of like a whole composite set of like Western interests and skills, and they don't have to, they benefit each other, and I love to be able to know how to pack, because now if someone drops me off the trailhead with the mules, I can load up everything on the mules and go to camp, which is something I didn't used to be able to do as a female too. I used to stand around and be like, oh yeah, I'll bring the bags over and you guys manty them, or I'll pack up the stuff from the kitchen, but you guys load the mules. And now it's like, no, I can do that, and I love this sort of comprehensive set of things that all go together. And I'm looking, as my life continues, to be able to do something that really can pull that together. And I have some ideas, but I haven't fully activated them yet. When I leave, like I've been working in Montana lately, and I love Montana so much, and I just love everything about it, and for people maybe that are back east, or my friends in Texas or whatever, they think it's wonderful, and then I go back and join whatever, I go back out on tour, and I think to myself, like, was it really that incredible? Like, am I just kind of inflating something that was actually like just okay, And then I come back to it, and it's like, it's a kingdom that somehow is just, so many people never access it. And it is as unimaginable and magical as it could possibly be. But for people if you've never gone to a dude ranch, or you've never camped in the wilderness, or you've never whatever, you don't even have that as a reference to pull you back, and that's why I think that these people who are able to come out for a day, a weekend, an overnight, do a pack trip, whatever, hike in, have us pack your stuff in, it is so, it's mind-blowing for people, because there aren't as many signposts in our culture anymore. There aren't Westerns on TV. Kids aren't growing up engaging with animals a lot. I mean, it's all screens, and it's a passive commercial enterprise for a lot of young people. And those things that used to bring people out west, and the imagination, they're, like you said, they're diminished to the point that those signposts are harder and harder to find. So when people do want to come out, I do love to spend time with them and make sure that whatever happens, they leave with this like unbelievable set of memories that just makes them want to amplify that and come back again and again. And so musically the same thing, but if anything, the horse and mule side of it has intensified over the last few years in a way that has sort of surprised me,
Those of us who play traditional music consider the interpretation of the songs that came before us just as important as the writing of new songs. The great guitarist and folk singer Dave Van Ronk once said this about the importance of song interpreters. Louis Armstrong did not do covers, nor did Billie Holiday, Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, Edith Piaf, or Aretha Franklin. While none of these people were primarily songwriters, their interpretations were a hell of a lot more original than a lot of the original songs being written on the current scene. Any music worth its salt depends as much on great interpreters as on great composers. What is more, in the absence of interpreters, songs will never be sung by anyone other than their own composers. And I cannot imagine why anyone would wish that kind of planned obsolescence on their own work.
I've spent so many years, doing a lot of interviews where people talk about, they call them covers, I prefer to look at things in terms of like standards or traditional songs. A cover to me sounds like something that you're going to play in Casper, Wyoming in the fourth set when everybody's wasted, or, what I mean? Like, I don't look at what we do as playing covers, but I think that playing folk music, traditional music over time, for me personally, it's like radicalized me on some level, because this constant focus on things being new, and if it's not new, why should we care? What are you doing that's new? It's like there's so much value in just like caretaking and just continuing to support something that's already beautiful and already established. It's like a garden, you know. Do you rip up your entire garden every year and replant it because you already bloomed those flowers last year? It's like a tree, you know. We love trees. A tree that's 500 years old, we look at that tree, and the older it is, the more reverence we have for it. It's like, well, guess what? That tree didn't pull itself up every 18 months and plant itself somewhere else. It grew to be that way by sticking with where it chose to grow, you know. And traditional music, I just don't really see any difference in that. It's like, in order to like play in a Western swing trio for 22 years, I do think there's a certain kind of like a tenacity, and it becomes a sort of political statement in which you say, this has value. You may not understand it, or you may be trying to monetize it or make it be something that it isn't, but there's nothing wrong with continuing to stay with something beautiful and valuable. And also, it's like, look at all the other things. Look at, you know, I was thinking about metaphors where it's like, well, steak, you know, eating is one that always comes to mind. Like, human beings have been cooking meat, you know, over a fire for like hundreds of thousands of years. And we still do that. Still, to go have a steak dinner is considered a wonderful, you know, pleasure. Or like, you know, like people making love. It's not like human beings have decided they have to change the way they make love because they've been doing that for millions of years. It actually works just fine as it is, you know. And same thing with a lot of this music. I just I've seen over the years that I love to hear people's new songs, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with staying with something traditional, and people love to hear those old songs, and there's nothing wrong with it, and I love to do it. So for example, the last record we did, as aside from what I just said, which is, I do feel that way about traditional songs, but, you know, we also like to write our own songs too. And the last one was all original songs, except for like a couple. I like to read poetry and listen to music intensively, like when I'm trying to write a song. And like, I always go back to the Carter family personally. And I also like to go back to like, I'm really into like, you know, I love Eastern religion, like devotional, like love poetry, like Tagore and stuff like that. I find that the images and the language are things that I love to incorporate even into this format. They work really well. So that's personally like what I do. But in terms of picking songs that are more traditional, you know, for our band, I think at this point we have a sense of what works. You know, if we hear a Will's version of like, you know, whatever it might be, I'll be like, I think we could do that. You know, that I like the 3-part singing, maybe Tommy Duncan singing the melody, but maybe I could sing the melody. We'll kind of go on these cycles. Sometimes we'll do a tour that has a theme, like we're about to do a tour of 1945 songs that were popular at the end of World War II, like for the 75th anniversary of that. So we picked songs, you know, material from that era, but again, it's got to be like stuff that the band, I think when you've been in a band that long, you've got a pretty good idea about what your bandmates will tolerate, you know, and how you can put things together. Maybe the arrangement that's maybe not too complicated and too precious, but kind of cool. And I don't know, it's just kind of like, and then we sometimes will prepare and work out a whole song and work really hard on it. And it just never really comes off live. So we just like, it goes into the scrap heap. But, you know, again, like Too Slim in his interview, he's talking about he likes a band. He said he likes to play in a band and that they live in Nashville and there are all these different players down there who are incredible. And I'd have to say I agree with that. I mean, I've made some records of my own, but there is something about the chemistry of a band when you take that song and you put it through the gauntlet, you know, you put it through the grinder of the Hot Club of Cowtown. No matter what it was when it started, it comes out sounding like us. And that's neat because I don't think there is a band out there that sounds just like us, which speaks to what you were talking about. We kind of go for the early iteration of Western swing, like the more like Hugh and Carl Farr, like the Light Crust Doughboys, that scrappy, you know, early style without drums, obviously. And it was kind of like we're kind of like the scrappy cousin to like Asleep at the Wheel. In Austin, I feel like they're kind of like the dominant Western swing group that's associated with Austin. But we still are in the Western swing wheelhouse, but we kind of have focused on that earlier, hotter, scrappier approach. I was going to play Wrangling, and actually this is... Johnny Gimbel had this on the Texas Fiddle collection, but I just love this song. It's a traditional tune, and I don't know why. We kind of use it at sound check sometimes, but it's a great one.
That's wonderful.
I love that one.
Thank you. Thanks for playing that.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for taking the time to tell me some stories.
My total pleasure. Thank you.
Alright folks, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Elana James for taking the time to visit with me. You can find out more about Elana at elanajames.com. And you can find out more about her band Hot Club of Cowtown at hotclubofcowtown.com. I'd like to thank the Western Folklife Center in Elko, Nevada for providing a space to record this interview. You can find out more about the Western Folklife Center at westernfolklife.org. You can find out more about me and this show at andyhedges.com. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help me keep it going, you can make a donation on the website, or you could take the time to leave a review and a rating on the iTunes store, or you could simply tell a friend to listen to the show. If you'd like to contact me with a question or a comment or a story, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.